We want to better understand how our students engage in learning tasks and what the implications are for us in the classroom. So how do you know it's been a successful hour and 15 minutes, hour and 10 minutes? Take a quick look. All right. So one of the things I want to focus on is how we move from potential to impact. One of the things that is most striking about the visible learning research, one of the things that we have tried to make sure that we convey in the ever-growing body of research on evidence-based practices, actually, let me do it this way. I want to make sure that we get a big punch here, and I want to kind of wake you up post-lunch. How many of you have, by a show of hands, and you can use your emotional reactions, have heard of evidence-based practices? So hopefully everybody's got their hand up in some capacity. Yes, hands up everywhere, and I appreciate that. So it turns out, let's see if I can wake everybody up this afternoon. It turns out that's not only not the whole story, but that's actually a misleading story. I'm gonna pause for a minute, see if anybody logs off. Okay, no, you're still with me. It turns out that's a misleading story, and in many cases, we run into some big problems here. For example, let me throw another scenario at you. How many of you have been to a conference, a workshop, or professional learning experience where you were presented with an evidence-based practice? You took notes, you got all the handouts, you followed it, then you went back to your classroom. You tried to do exactly what the presenter told you to do, and it was an utter disaster. They were swinging from the rafters. It was an absolute train wreck. That doesn't make any sense because you were told that it was an evidence-based practice. You were told that research said it should work. You were told that it doubled the rate of learning. You were told that it had an effect size this big. So are you the anomaly? Or did we not share something with you that probably should have been shared on the front end? And the answer is we probably should have shared something with you on the front end. And this is brutal. So it turns out that anytime you hear about an evidence-based practice, the first thing that should pop into your brain is potential. In fact, type potential into the chat box. Put that right into the chat box, potential. Here's the deal. When you read an effect size, when you find out that something is correlated, when you hear something as an evidence-based practice, what we often don't tell individuals from the research perspective, and we're getting better at this, John and Doug and Nancy and I have made a personal effort to start throwing this language out there to say, look, the effect size represents the potential to have an impact. What separates the potential from the impact is, any guesses? What separates the potential from the actual impact? Denise got it. Paula got it. Yep, absolutely. Yosef got it. Yep, Paula got it. Absolutely. It's implementation. And the implementation relies heavily on who's in front of you. In other words, I like to put it this way. You should always put the who before the do. You should always put the who before the do, because what a jigsaw looks like in Lindsay Britt's class is going to look very different than what a jigsaw might look like in Shannon's class, what it might look like in Christy's class, Cameron's class, Tim's class, Samantha's class, Katie's class. They're going to be different, but the underlying strategy is a jigsaw. But what it looks like, how we implement it, depends on who's in front of us. So one of the things we want to focus on today is how do we address that gap between potential and impact? How do we make sure that we don't fall into the trap of, well, I read how to do a jigsaw and I did it on Tuesday and it didn't work? That's really our focus. So a couple of big ideas to just throw out there right away. We know a lot about teaching and learning. When somebody, it frustrates me sometimes when folks outside of education make the statement about, well, we don't really know a lot about, that's not true. We know a ton about teaching and learning. In fact, we know almost 200 years worth of research about learning in particular. And we're getting better and better at teaching. We know a lot. Where we struggle, though, is that transition from intention to implementation. So why am I going down this soapbox? Because as you leave the NTA and start to enter into your official summer and begin to think about the fall, one of the things to keep in mind is the nuggets of information you have heard and learned here this week have starts with the P, the potential to impact your learners, but you still have to implement it. In other words, the professional expertise of the teacher continues to reign supreme. No exceptions. In fact, the single biggest predictor of student learning is the teacher, not the boxed curriculum, not the scripted curriculum, not the pacing guide, but the actual teacher, and not so much the degree of the teacher. Here's another one we run into. Well, I have a degree in mathematics, so I know how to teach mathematics. Actually, odds are you don't. In fact, odds are you're not going to be as effective as someone who didn't have a degree in mathematics. I'm going to let that land on a couple of you for a second. It's after lunch, so my purpose is to stir you up. Why? Well, because of a concept known as the expert blind effect. If you would type that into the chat box, expert blind effect. Here's what the expert blind effect is, says, and does. The expert blind effect simply says that once you get really, really good at something, you actually forget what it was like not to know. And so as a result, you often communicate in a way that makes assumptions about the tacit knowledge of the individuals in front of you. And so you experience the expert blind effect. Now I want to show you a short video of the expert blind effect. And in this short video clip, I want you to watch for it. And I want you to be able to point it out when you see it. But we're looking for the expert blind effect. And now I'm having technical issues. So apparently it's par for the course today. Maybe. I want to show you a video clip, but here we go, of the expert blind effect. Hang on. There it is. All right. Give me just a second to catch up on this one here. There we go. Okay, sorry, my thing's not responding. Bailey, I think, there we go. Okay, I'm good. Never mind, Bailey, I'm covered. Here's the expert blind effect. Take a look.
Now, I am very disappointed that I won't be able to celebrate Howard's accomplishment tonight.
Me too, but we'll see him tomorrow.
Yes, it's just that in all the years I've known him, he's never had the opportunity to receive my admiration. I was excited to see the look on his face when it finally happened.
You're unbelievable.
I know.
All right, Pictionary. What are the teams?
How about boys versus girls?
Oh, that hardly seems fair. Yeah, but I guess any team that I'm not on has a decided disadvantage.
Once again, unbelievable.
Yeah, once again, I know.
All right, round one. Here.
Got it.
Okay, ready, set, go.
Box. Window.
Batman. Batman and Robin. Wonder Twins plus the monkey. Wonder Twins plus the monkey and Batman.
Gift. Present.
Present! Yeah!
Oh, Leonard. Now, how can you not get that?
In what universe is that a present?
It's not a present, it's the present. Look, there's you and me, it's Penny and Amy. We're playing Pictionary in the present.
Oh my God, we're gonna kill them.
It's a quark gluon plasma.
No.
It's asymptotically free partons inside a quark gluon plasma.
Nothing with quarks.
It's an observational rebuttal of the lambda CDM model of the universe.
No.
It's a chocolate chip cookie, yes!
How could you miss that?
Hey, if you want someone to guess chocolate chip cookie, you draw a glass of milk next to it.
Penny got it?
Yeah, only after I eliminated all the obvious answers. You're welcome.
Sausage. Bratwurst. Hot dog.
Penny, aren't you going to draw something?
Relax, we got time. This is so fun.
There.
A solar system. Unidentified flying liverwurst.
Now?
Soon.
Come on, Leonard. I am spoon feeding this to you.
I don't know. Casper the alcoholic ghost?
All right, that's enough.
Hand, nail, polish?
Yeah!
No! The word is Polish. See, look. Polish sausage. The model of the solar system developed by Nicholas Copernicus, a Polish astronomer. And then finally, that wasn't enough, which it should have been. This is Madame Curie killing herself by discovering radium, who, although she was a naturalized French citizen, was Polish by birth.
Excuse me, the word is polish. See? Small p.
Ah. So it is. I guess we both share blame on this one.
That is, in an absolute nutshell, the expert blind effect. Expert blind effect. You had two individuals that were experts in their field that were so blinded by that expertise that they lacked the capacity to communicate it to someone else. On the flip side, you had Amy and Penny, who were on very different levels of readiness around those content areas. Very different. And we can talk about the stereotypes perpetuated by the Big Bang later. That's not the point of this conversation. I love the show, stereotypes aside. But my point being is that you had two individuals, Penny and Amy, on very different levels of expertise that found a way to communicate, and here we go, wait for it, and include each other in the experience and the task. Which means, as we move to talk about engagement over the next 45 minutes, we have to be very careful that we take into mind that in order to be inclusive in our tasks and set them up to include every learner, to give every learner access and opportunity to the highest level of learning possible, we have to keep ourselves in check with the expert blind effect, or we're going to struggle just as they did in this video clip. The expert blind effect is real. If you don't believe me, I'm going to be very unprofessional for a moment and tell you how you can get a better example of this. How many of you graduated from a college or university? Where would you identify the worst teacher you ever had in your career? At that college and university. Enough said. The expert blind effect is alive and well. We don't want to translate it to this particular experience. Right? We don't want to translate it to this particular experience. So let's talk about engagement. We want to talk about engagement through a very different lens than we have in the past. Now, you've already seen this before, but when we talk about engagement, remember, we're moving away from the traditional model of cognitive, behavioral, and emotional. We've moved into agentic. Now, Dr. Chin introduced this to you earlier in the week. I want to circle back and get it. Cognitive, behavioral, and emotional engagement was how we used to look at things. That's how we used to approach engagement. But COVID-19 and our closing of schools taught us that that model isn't going to hold in all circumstances. Why? Because I can't be next to a student to get them to behaviorally engage when they're not. I can't walk over and tap them on the shoulder. I can't conveniently work their name into a sentence to get them to look up. I can't click my fingers at them and give a gesture to them real quick. Why? Because they're on the Brady Bunch Zoom board and they may or may not have their camera on, which means I cannot rely on the old model of engagement. Turns out this is not a bad thing. This is not a bad thing, because as we come back, as we reinvest, reinfocus, and rebound into our new normal, agentic engagement is the driving force. Here's what I'd like you to do. You're going to need something to write with and something to write on. So you've got your sheet of paper. If you would, hold it up to the screen so I know you're ready to roll. Now, if you do not have a loose sheet of paper, then this next task you can draw on, but don't rip it out of your notebook, hang tight. But what we're going to do is we're going to fold it like a hamburger. And that gives us two sections like this. Then we're going to fold it like a hot dog. So now you should have quadrants, or you should have 4 quadrilaterals on your sheet of paper. Oh, and we're not done. So then fold it like a hamburger and a hot dog at the same time, please. So now you have this. This is really important. You ready? The corner that has everything, right? So you see how when I fold it like a hot dog, I have this one corner piece right here. You see how I've got it right there? Grab it. Fold it down like a diamond. Like this, like a diamond, fold it down just like that. Yep, good, 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 good. Hold it up if you've got it so I can see. Yeah, perfect. So when you open it up, you have a folded Freyer model. You have a folded Freyer model. All right. Each quadrilateral gets one of the things you see on the screen: cognitive, behavioral, emotional, and affective. Cognitive, behavioral, affective, and emotional. So each one of those gets its own quadrant or quadrilateral. And what goes in the middle? Any guesses?
Agentic.
Agentic engagement. Whoops. Autocorrect. Gosh, it keeps autocorrecting it. There we go. Right. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to slide into breakout rooms very quickly. You have 7 minutes to quickly review cognitive, behavioral, affective, emotional, and agentic engagement in the middle. When you come back, we're going to do something with it. This is pure review in your breakout rooms. You'll have 7 minutes. When you come back, we're going to add to this and take this to the next level. But let's review first. 7 minutes, breakout rooms, away we go. Love with the good life. Hang on to that one until this is over with, and then you may feel that way. Those kind of things you can do all kinds of cool stuff. Yes, you can save it. So as you probably suspect, there are free versions of this, and then there's the paid version. So Jordan, you can do with it as you wish there, but I use it all the time. With my classes, what I do is I will take a Word document and put in all their first names and last names on the Word document. And then when a new class comes, open the Word document, copy and paste it into there, and it takes you 2 seconds. So I just put all my classes ready to roll, put them in there. And because you can imagine with 22-year-olds that often log on to Zoom from a bar, I'm gonna wait and let that land on somebody, or grad students that take a class that already know everything. They'll just sit through class and let you take over. And so I have to do something to get them involved. So yeah, absolutely. It's a great way to do it. So let's talk about that. Yusuf, you got us off to a great start, and I want to keep that momentum rolling. I want to share with you some of the latest research on how we make this inclusive. So I'm going to share with you 7 pillars to kind of think about, and then a process for implementing everything that we've done thus far into your own classroom. But I will tell you, some of the research we're about to talk about is so new. It's so new, it has not seen the light of day. So this is the latest stuff that John Hattie, Doug Fisher, Nancy Fry, and I are working on. The first thing to keep in mind, and I say this for two reasons. Number one is because throughout this whole week, we've often referred to early career teachers and instructional coaches. Sometimes you've been separated, sometimes you've been together. But I also want you to understand that that separation or that togetherness and that distinction is not meant to be derogatory or to be patronizing. In fact, because of this body of research, there is strong evidence that you could be in year 0 to 3 and be more effective than someone who's in year 26. Because the correlation between experience and effectiveness is 0 outside of 5 years in the classroom. So just because you are part of the 0 to 3 cohort doesn't mean we're speaking to your effectiveness. What we're actually doing is we're striving to partner with you so that we have longevity from you, not just effectiveness. It doesn't do us any good if you're effective during your first 3 years, only to get to your 4th year, be burnt out, and leave the profession. The other interesting fact or idea from research, not a fact, from research is that it often plateaus and declines after the 7th year in the classroom. And so we want to also make sure that we provide support moving forward so that you continue to improve. And that's also something you will hear your instructional coaches say, that they enjoy being instructional coaches in the VA NTSP because it helps them keep their skills sharp. It helps them stay active and learn from you just as much as you learn from them. So let's talk about ways to do this. How do we make sure that we stand out? In other words, how do we ensure that we're not just going through the motions, but that we're highly effective? Well, one of the first things we can do, one of the first pillars that we can do to ensure that our tasks are inclusive and engaging is to take the mindset that our job, our primary job, is to evaluate our impact on student learning. Teachers who believe that their primary responsibility is to do something and then watch and see if it works, they tend to have an effect size on students equivalent to 1.32 standard deviations. By the way, for those of you following along in your hymnals, that more than triples the rate of learning. Triples the rate of learning. If you would put that in the chat box, triples the rate of learning. Now, this is really super cool. Why does this have anything to do with inclusion and equity? Because as we do this, as we try, so let's say we put in a task, an activity, or an experience, much like the ones that Dr. Chin talked to us about this morning. Let's say we create clarity the way we learned on Tuesday. Let's say we talk about the science of learning the way we did on Monday, and then we take our assessments that we learned about yesterday, and we send out formative assessments, informal or formal formative assessments, to see if it had any impact on student learning. Well, we can't just go, oh, well, that kid got it and that kid didn't. Instead, it gives us data that allows us to figure out who benefited. This is really important. Who benefited from my instruction and who did not benefit? On Thursday, who benefited from instruction and who did not? And then we try to figure out, is there a pattern amongst those that did not benefit? Now, I'm going to be a little bit direct here, but I think it's very important to get down deep with this. If the learners in your classroom that didn't do well share a common background or demographic characteristic, we have an inclusion and equity issue. If the learners that did not benefit from my instruction today had a demographic or background characteristic that tied them all together, I have an equity issue. Why is it males don't do well in my math class? Why is it that only the athletes are showing growth? Why is it that only fill in the blank, a demographic or background characteristic is showing growth in my class? Then for some reason, I'm not being completely inclusive and supportive of all of my learners. And so I need to check things out. Maybe it has to do with the second pillar. The second pillar is establish and maintain high expectations. That has an effect size of 0.90. It more than doubles the rate of learning. It more than doubles the rate of learning. Well, what do we mean by those high expectations? What exactly are we talking about there? Well, I want to show you a research study on this because, that's the way we roll here. And I want to look at it from the standpoint of just expectations. This study has been done. They've looked at it to see what actually plays out in schools related to expectations. How do we check our expectations? In 2018, the New Teacher Project released a report that shared striking results about expectations. It found that when you looked at two groups of schools, cluster A, cluster B. Cluster A and cluster B, demographically and background-wise, are identical groups of schools. Student body composition, teacher experience. In other words, these two groups of schools were on the surface demographically and characteristically the same. In other words, in education, it's the closest we have to a control group. But this group over here saw growth. This group over here did not. How can the same types of schools have such a differential outcome? Turns out the answer is on the screen. The groups of schools that showed the most growth versus those that didn't, it had to do with the amount of time the learners were asked to engage in grade level appropriate tasks. Schools that did not show growth spent 133 on average hours on assignments that were not grade appropriate. 47 were. For schools that showed growth, this number was flipped. Now think about that. Are you asking your students to participate in grade level appropriate tasks and assignments? Or are we doing what Sanja and Nicole talked about on Monday, and we're coming up with excuses? The my baby excuse. My babies can't do that. My babies aren't ready for that. My babies can't, and you can fill in the blank with any statements you want to put in there. Now, I'm going to ask you this, and this is for a free book. If you get this right, you get a free book. This week, you learned about a strategy or a way to ensure that I could keep learners on grade level, but provide them support if they had gaps in their background or prior knowledge. I need somebody to tell me where that was in the week. Where did we pick up an idea on how to do this? Equity was the baseline. There was a specific strategy. Scaffolding is close. Specifically, how did we scaffold? It actually happened this morning. What did you learn about this morning that would help with this? Complexity, differentiation, absolutely. Difficulty and complexity. So we can provide learners with on-grade level assignments. And by the way, if they spent 25% of their time or more on grade level assignments, you saw the top curve. If they spent less than that, you saw the bottom curve. What's the point? The point is that we need to make sure that when we say high expectations doesn't mean, well, I give out 2 A's and 2 B's and the rest are C's because I have high expectations. Let me try to stir the pot a little bit. If you have 180 days with learners or 90 days with learners and you only had 2 A's, 180 days and only 2 of your students demonstrated proficiency or mastery, that's not high expectations. That's horrible teaching. 180 days and you couldn't get more than 2 A's out of your learners? That's not good. So we've confused that. We've confused rigor with our grades. Instead, Instead, high expectations mean we are going to do grade level work. Tell me more about your question. Does it refer to sign below or above grade level? This is at least at grade level appropriate. So in that case, it could have been above if the student was above in their readiness.
Yeah, well, I was thinking like when you were referring to the oh baby excuse, because that to me would mean that you're thinking they're not capable. So you would drop it down and make it simpler. And so I'm just wondering, like, does that happen more often than giving students work that might be above their grade level?
We're more inclined to give them assignments that are below grade level because we don't think they can. And here's why this is important. Coming off of the COVID-19 situation, the feeling might be, and again, I told you, when you get me after lunch, get ready, because I'm gonna stir the pot, because I don't want you to get into a food coma and be bored. So I'm going to constantly push. That's just the way I teach. And for those of you that have survived my classes, you know this is how I operate. My job is to get you to think. Here's the deal. They come into and Lindsay Britt, I'm looking at you, because we live this in our Lindsay Britt teaches in the school system and at the school that my children attend. When they come back in the fall, Tessa, who finished 3rd grade, is going to be entering 4th grade. The pressure might be, oh my gosh, they haven't been here all last year. So when they come into 4th grade, I'm going to have to do 3rd grade. When Jackson goes into 2nd grade, his teacher may be inclined to say, well, I need to redo 1st grade because last year was just, it was. Time out. The evidence does not support that. The evidence supports the reverse. When Tessa walks into William Perry Elementary School next year and on the first day of 4th grade, she needs to do 4th grade work right off the bat. I mean, right off the bat. Jackson needs to do 2nd grade work. Here's why. Because we can give them 4th grade work and 2nd grade work. And when we identify that there are gaps in their background knowledge, you pause and you fill and keep moving. But to reteach all of 3rd grade during the first 2 weeks of 4th grade is a mistake, and it does not work. We know this. We have data on this. We've gone through this before, just not as a result of COVID. So we want them on grade level as soon as possible. Why? Because in Virginia, this is the best part, and Amy, I'm going to amen it, and then I promise I'm going to move on. I'm going to stop preaching. In Virginia, our standards are vertically aligned. So 2.4 in math and 3.4 in math and 4.4 in math are vertically aligned. So you can go back and say, I need to develop a pre-assessment task, not a pre-assessment multiple choice, but something to do to find out where their gaps are. But then we're going to do 4.4 and I'll fill in 3.4 as needed. But on grade level, that's the difference between this curve here and this curve right here. And I know it's counterintuitive, but at the end of the day, it accounts for 4.6 months worth of growth. When they come through the door, what are your expectations for them? The effect size is 0.90. Huge effect size. Huge effect size. By skill by kid, not everyone all the time. Yep. Yeah, so Kim, all right. So we're gonna take I'm gonna switch gears on you real quick because I want to show you something. This was not part of the, I tend to try to respond to questions that come up. Let me pull it down and I'm gonna show you something I'm not supposed to show you, but I'm gonna show you anyway. Here we go. This is something that we are working on. So John Hattie and I are working on this, and it's not yet available, but I'm going to show it to you real quick and let you see where we're thinking. On the screen, and who's on the screen? Anybody know who that is? Who those two individuals are?
Galileo and Isaac Newton.
That's right. Absolutely. Galileo and Newton, science teachers chime in. So why would I bring that up? Because when we talk about accelerated learning, which is the new buzzword, right? Accelerated learning, accelerated learning, accelerated learning. Turns out that when you say accelerated learning, Isaac Newton and Galileo settled this a long time ago. Acceleration is defined as a change in speed or direction, which means acceleration could be increasing speed, decreasing speed, or changing direction, which means I might actually have to slow down my instruction next year to accelerate. I might actually have to change direction next year to accelerate. Maybe in English language arts, they come in and we didn't get the reading loss we thought we were going to get. By the way, that's what the international data is showing. The loss did not occur in reading. The loss occurred in mathematics. So maybe when they come back, I need to figure out how to change direction in my language arts classes to go a different direction than the pacing guide, because I found out, oh, they're good with this. So I need to change direct. We need to start right off the bat. Whereas in math, I might have to say, okay, so they're a little rough on their basic skills, but conceptually they're with me. So I'm going to change directions and I'm going to do a conceptual unit first. And then I'm going to do basic skills during small group and intervention time. So I changed directions there. I didn't change my speed. I changed the order that I did my units. But too often we believe accelerated learning is increasing speed. Accelerated learning is not just increasing speed. We may actually change direction and slow down. Why would we think it's only increasing speed? Because we're coming in with low expectations. We believe that last year learners couldn't learn, teachers couldn't teach, and the last 18 months was a loss. Now watch this, you ready? Here we go. This is the effect size for COVID. We have an effect size for COVID. This just came out last week. It's brand spanking new. It turns out the effect size for COVID is negative 0.14. Okay. So here's the deal. Is that a problem? What do you think of that negative 0.14? Effect size on student learning growth. Yep. Pre and post assessments. Some children thrived, right? Kelly, it's done on pre and post assessments. So you look for growth. An effect size is a measure of growth. It can be here's how I know it can be quickly overcome. Watch this. The effect size for bullying. Anybody know what it is? It's going to come up in the chat box in just a second. You ready? Bullying. How about boredom? How about labeling students?
Is this effect size on boredom and bullying as a result of COVID also? No,
it was before COVID.
Oh, before COVID. Okay.
How about this? Labeling students as poor, those kids, other side of the tracks, comes from a bad family. Boy, you should have taught their brother. Oh, right? Now look at this. Look at the power of this. The 18-month shutdown was less detrimental to our students than bullying, boredom, and making assumptions and stereotyping children. Anybody with me on this? Come on, that's better than y'all are acting. Let me let that land on somebody. My point is, quit talking about the COVID group. Quit talking about learning loss. If your school had bullies in it before COVID, that was more harmful to them than COVID. The numbers are just showing us that our kids are resilient. Our teachers stepped up to the challenge. And here we are. So high expectations matter. We don't have catch up. We have unfinished learning. Type in the chat box unfinished. Type in the chat box unfinished. That's exactly what we have. Unfinished learning. That's the way to frame it. That's what we mean when we say high expectations. So I want to share just a couple more things with you before we wind down. And then I promise I will hop off the soapbox and we will get on with the rest of our day. So we were talking about high expectations, and we talked about why it matters. And it matters because it turns out the data doesn't support this idea that last year was a loss, that learners didn't learn and teachers didn't teach, but instead we found a way. Education once again stepped up to the plate. Our learners were resilient. And so we should have high expectations, but be prepared to do what Dr. Chen taught us this morning: adjust the difficulty and keep the complexity, provide scaffolding, provide prompts and cues, provide adaptive and compensatory approaches so that while I'm working on fifth grade work, you're helping me close any gaps that might be there, because there are gaps, not lost. They're unfinished learning. From there, we want to make sure that we work alongside our learners towards clear success criteria. Define for them what success looks like. What does it mean to be a learner in your classroom? What does it mean to be successful at this content with this skill and this understanding? Let them know what success looks like and work alongside them to get there. Maybe the learner is not good at their multiplication facts yet, but understands area and perimeter. Then give them a calculator. Give them a calculator. They'll be all right. I don't know what 8 times 7 is, and I don't have to. I have a graduate assistant and an Excel spreadsheet that does it for me. I haven't used 8 times 7 since 5th grade. Then we find the right level of challenge. This is the Goldilocks effect that Lisa talked to you about this morning. Complexity and difficulty. You're going to have to adjust it for each student. Amy pointed this out. Student first, task later. Once you figure out who's in front of you, then the do. The who before the do. Yeah, and Amy, I could amen you on that one too. When people talk about learning loss compared to who? We were all in this together. Now, with the government's release of UFO information, we maybe have somebody outside of our solar system to compare it to, but we don't have their achievement data yet. So until that happens, we don't have anything to compare it to Alpha Centauri. We have to stick with what we've got. Ooh, here's another one. Another way we can be inclusive is to make sure we establish a trusting environment where mistakes are welcomed. In other words, we should value mistakes more than the correct answer. Why? Because when we get it right, we just get it right. When we get it wrong, our brains actually flag the wrong way to do things and sets it over here on the side. It says, Miss Knight just gave me my paper back and told me that wasn't the right way to do it. And, oh, let me sit that over here. In the brain, it compartmentalizes it so that then when you do it again, here's what experts do. We actually have fMRI data of this. We have people's brain scans doing something that they're an expert at. Here's what they do. They don't go straight to the right answer. They methodically go through all of the wrong answers and eliminate them as choices, and then go with the right answer that's left. Which means if we don't help learners discover the wrong way, they don't have that same list to go through that experts do. Doctors do it this way, and by the way, expert teachers do. They look at a learner and they start to diagnose and discover where the support's needed. And they start to rule out things. Well, let's rule out that. Well, let's rule out that. Well, so it must be this. Let's try this. Mistakes matter. Grades don't. We have to seek out feedback. We have to seek out feedback of how things are going. I'm gonna let y'all watch this video clip to really see if you get. I looked long and hard for this video clip. Do you see why it matches the effect size? Who's the feedback coming from?
The baby.
So in our classrooms, who should the feedback come from?
Our students.
Yeah, I'm gonna try something on Monday and I'm gonna watch to see what happens. And if it goes down well and learning happens, I keep moving. If I hand them something and they react the way this baby's reacting, then I have to change something. I can't turn around and say, well, you know what? I've done it this way for 26 years, so I'm just going to keep moving forward. Right. And you're the reason that people plateau beyond 7 years and there's no correlation between effectiveness and expertise beyond 5. That idea that because I've done it this way for 26 years, it must be effective. Yikes. And I'm guilty of it too. More so. That's why I'm at a university. Graveyard for bad public school teachers. And finally, we have to strike a balance between surface and deep learning. This is the last one. This is the last of the 7 pillars. It's not all about deep learning. There's nothing wrong with surface learning. Surface learning has a place. It has a role in what we're doing. In order to understand multiplication, you have to understand repeated addition. In order to do division, you have to understand sorting and groups. In order to understand decimals, you have to understand place value. Surface learning is not the enemy. Some days we have to do surface learning, some days we have to do deep. The idea that we only do deep learning is flawed. In fact, I always chuckle when schools proclaim and school divisions proclaim, this school division only focuses on deep learning. Good luck. It's not going to work. There is a role for surface learning. You have to have the tip of the iceberg if you're ever going to have the iceberg that's below the water. You with me on that? If you take out the tip of the iceberg, then the rest of the iceberg comes to the surface. You got to have one and the other together. You can't have one and not the other. So these are 7 ways to make sure that we promote an inclusive environment. Let's review them very quickly, and then we're going to wind down. We're going to wind down. This one, strike a balance between surface and deep learning. Make sure we're constantly looking for feedback from who? Who are we looking for? Yes, look for feedback from our students. Make sure we value mistakes. We're constantly looking for the right level of challenge. Focus on the who before the do. Make sure we're working towards clear success criteria so the target is defined. You can't hit a target you can't see. Make sure our expectations are high. And by high expectations, I don't mean make yourself inappropriately difficult just to prove a point. High expectations mean you believe they can learn, will learn, and it's because of you that they will learn and can learn. And get in there with them and take care of business. And last and certainly not least, constantly monitor your impact. Constantly monitor your impact. And my parting statement before we get ready to transition to SETSA is this. The opportunity to work with you and alongside you is the honor of a lifetime, because I learn as much from you as you could ever get from us. But at the end of the day, here's the message. Years ago, I had a chance to hear Maya Angelou speak. I was within arm's reach of her, and she gave a stunning performance where she kept us engaged for an hour and a half, and all she did was sit in a chair and hold a microphone. Now that's a gift. Well, it's what she said at the end of her time with us that mattered the most to me. She said that somebody paved the way for us to be here. And you can name that person. You can think in your head the individual that paved the way for you to be here right now. The best thing we can do for the generation behind us is be that person that paves the way for them to be there. Because no matter what the media tell us, and I'm not identifying anybody, I'm talking about the whole TV world. We can't trade them in. They're coming, and they're the next generation. There's no substituting. There's no trading them in for somebody else. And so the best thing we can do is stop telling the kids that they're all right and start telling them that they're just right, and make sure that our solitary focus is that they are better off at the end of the day getting on the bus than they were getting off the bus that day, just because they spent a few hours with you. If you can crawl in bed at night and lay your head down on your pillow, and you know with confidence and with evidence that the learners you spent time with today are better off because you were in their day, congratulations. You've done it. If not, it's also the only profession where you're going to get another shot tomorrow. Plumbers don't have that luxury. Neurosurgeons don't have that luxury. If they make a mistake on Tuesday, they're not coming back on Wednesday to fix it. We have the chance to use this evidence to see who's benefiting and who's not benefiting, and do something about it the next day if it didn't go as planned. So with that, we're going to take just a couple of minutes for you to process this, think through this, and in your email, Bailey provided you with the link. We're going to join the other Early Career Teacher Academy and do a joint session that's going to end out our time this week. So you're going to log off here. You will log on to SETSA, but Bailey is going to stay on this Zoom link for a while, just in case you can't get onto SETSA. Come back here and Bailey and I will get you in the right direction. So we'll see you at 2:15.